"I can help," Maya Williams said, loud and clear. Everyone turned. A 10-year-old black girl stood just inside the Monroe Holdings boardroom, facing a room full of stunned executives, security guards, and one furious billionaire. The interpreter had collapsed minutes earlier, a sudden stroke, right there in the hallway. Paramedics were still en route, but the delegation from Dubai was arriving now. The $30 million deal on the table was the company's last hope. Without it, Monroe Holdings would fall into default. Over 1,200 employees would lose their jobs. Investors would pull out. The boardroom pulsed with tension. Across the table, billionaire CEO Victor Langston rose from his chair and barked, "Get that girl out of here, now, before this turns into a circus." 2 security guards moved immediately. Maya took a step back, resisting. "No, let me help," she shouted, twisting out of their grip. "I speak Arabic and French. Please, if you don't let me help, this company will collapse." Gasps rippled. Executives exchanged uneasy glances. One murmured, "What did she just say?" "Get her out now," another cried. "This is insane." The guards reached her again, gripping her arms. Maya fought back, her voice louder, firmer. "Let me try. You have no other choice. And if this moment moved you even just a little, we'd love to hear where in the world you're watching from. Drop a comment below. Your voice matters here. If stories like this inspire you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. There's so much more to come, and we'd be honored to have you on this journey with us. Then the door burst open. A woman rushed in, eyes wide with panic. "Maya!" It was Liana William, her mother. Her face was pale. "She's just a child." More shouting. One executive screamed, "If she messes this up, we'll all pay for it." Victor Langston raised a hand. Silence. The room froze. He stared at Maya for a long moment, then said, "We're out of time. We gamble once." "Sir, this is highly irregular," someone started. Victor cut him off. "Let her try. If she fails, we're finished anyway." The guards released her. Maya stepped forward, chest rising with each breath. Her mother clasped her hands over her mouth. In the hall, staff whispered and stared. "I won't let you down," Maya said. Victor nodded once. The doors opened. The Dubai delegation entered, and a 10-year-old girl stood at the edge of corporate collapse in history. Maya stood at the head of the massive conference table, her heart hammering like a freight train in her chest. Her fingers tightened around the hem of her hoodie. The Dubai delegation filed into the room, 5 sharply dressed men and 1 woman in a navy hijab. Their expressions were unreadable, but their eyes flicked toward the girl in confusion. One of them leaned to another and whispered in Arabic, "She's a child." Maya understood every word. "I may be a child," she replied, in precise Arabic, "but I am also fluent, and right now, I'm the only bridge between you and the deal." The room tensed. The Dubai delegation looked startled, then intrigued. One man cracked a faint smile. Victor Langston leaned back in his chair, arms folded. "Begin." Sophia Monroe, still reeling from the whirlwind of the last 10 minutes, handed Maya a copy of the contract summary. Her fingers brushed the girl's hand. "Just do your best," she whispered. Maya nodded and took a breath, pushing her shoulders back. She scanned the room one last time, her mother standing near the door, trembling. A dozen high-level executives, half of whom had tried to throw her out 5 minutes ago, now watched her like a live wire. She turned toward the delegation and opened her mouth. The meeting began. The Dubai lead delegate, Mr. Al-Murad, spoke first fluid, confident Arabic. Maya translated instantly, her voice calm and measured. She didn't just deliver the words, she captured the tone, the intent. When he made a joke about the New York weather, she smiled faintly and passed it on with the same dry humor. The table chuckled. Victor's brow lifted slightly. So far, so good. Then came the real test, the legal terms. Al-Murad outlined a set of proposed changes to the liability clause in the event of contract default. It was complex, layered in diplomatic nuance. Maya paused for only a second before she began translating, speaking slowly, choosing words with care. A junior lawyer at the table whispered, "She's doing better than the last 3 adult translators we've hired." Someone else added, "Is she reading legalese?" "She's thinking in it," murmured another. But just as confidence began to bloom, it happened. A single word, tasri, slipped past her. Maya hesitated. She knew it, She'd studied it. But in this context, its meaning fractured into possibilities. Permit, declaration, exemption, one wrong choice, and the meaning of the clause could flip entirely. The room noticed her pause. Whispers rippled. Victor's eyes narrowed. Maya swallowed. Her hands clenched. She could hear her mother shifting at the door. Somewhere in the blur, someone muttered, "We shouldn't have let her do this." Then Maya looked at Mr. Al-Murad. "Sir," she said in Arabic, "to clarify, when you said tasri, did you mean regulatory exemption or export clearance?" He blinked. "Regulatory exemption." "Thank you," she replied and continued. Sophia exhaled. A few executives nodded in approval, but not everyone was pleased. One man, Mr. Denner, VP of Legal Affairs, leaned toward Victor. "She's sharp, yes, but this is a multi-million-dollar deal. If she makes even one semantic mistake..." Victor held up a finger, "And if she hadn't stepped in, we'd be packing our boxes by now." Back at the head of the table, Maya was hitting her stride. She translated both directions now, fielding questions from Monroe's board and delivering answers from the Dubai team with uncanny poise. She had a rhythm. Listen, confirm, relay. Her voice never wavered. But it wasn't just the translation. Maya listened deeper than most. When Mr. Al-Murad mentioned that his government was under pressure to complete the deal quickly, she noted the hesitation in his tone. When Monroe's CFO asked about currency volatility, she detected a flicker of concern in the Dubai team's expressions. She leaned toward Sophia and whispered in English, "They're worried about timing. They'll accept the late payment clause if we add a guarantee of stability." Sophia blinked, then turned to Victor. "We can concede late payment if we reinforce the conversion lock." Victor studied Maya, then nodded. "Do it." The new offer was made. The Dubai team conferred quietly among themselves. Then Mr. Al-Murad turned and smiled. "In that case," he said, "we have a deal." The room erupted. There was no cheering, not yet, but the air shifted palpably. Shoulders relaxed. Pens scratched signatures. A general counsel leaned back and whispered, "That girl just saved this company." Victor remained silent, watching Maya as she stepped back from the table, her face pale with exhaustion. Sophia approached the girl, knelt to her height. "You were brilliant." Maya nodded once. "Can I sit now?" Sophia smiled and stood, turning to the room. "Gentlemen, I suggest we applaud." The entire boardroom, all 22 people, stood and clapped, some hesitantly, some with awe. Liana William, still frozen by the door, brought both hands to her face. Victor clapped too, slowly, deliberately. Then he said, "Someone get this girl a glass of water," and someone else call the press. Maya sat on the edge of a leather chair, her legs dangling. Her hoodie was damp with sweat. Her mother rushed forward, wrapping her in a hug so tight it made her gasp. "You scared me," Liana whispered. "I had to do it," Maya replied. "No one else could." Victor crossed the room. "Miss William." Maya looked up. "You just saved us 1,200 jobs in a company that took 30 years to build." He paused. "That's not just talent. That's leadership." She smiled faintly. "My mom taught me to listen. My dad taught me to be brave. I'd like to meet both," Victor said. Her mother straightened. "You just did." The room laughed, light finally returning to tired faces. Victor turned to Sophia. "Keep her close. We may need her again." And in that moment, Maya William, age 10, daughter of a building custodian and a language teacher, became the most unexpected hero Monroe Holdings had ever seen. Outside the boardroom, the skyline of Manhattan gleamed. Inside, something far rarer had just unfolded. A room full of hardened professionals had witnessed the power of courage wrapped in innocence and the saving grace of a girl who simply refused to be ignored. The morning after the deal, the New York skyline felt sharper somehow. The city still bustled with its usual urgency, taxis honking, crowds rushing, the pulse of ambition beating under every sidewalk crack. But for the Monroe Holdings building, something had changed. People whispered more respectfully when they passed the security desk. There was an unspoken electricity in the air, like the building itself knew it had just dodged a bullet. Maya Williams sat quietly in the back of the executive lounge, sipping a hot cocoa that someone from HR had insisted she deserved. She wore clean jeans, a fresh hoodie, and a badge clipped to her collar that read, "Temporary Clearance Guest of CEO." She hadn't asked for it. She didn't even understand why the man had typed it out so quickly and handed it to her with trembling hands. Across the glass, through the thick paneled boardroom doors, the Monroe Holdings leadership team was gathering for an emergency post-deal meeting. It wasn't about numbers this time. It was about her. "What do we do with her?" one board member whispered. "She's 10, said another. "We can't exactly offer her a position, but we can't ignore what she did." Victor Langston entered the room last, carrying a tablet and an unlit cigar he never smoked. He placed both on the polished table and looked around. "Let's begin." Meanwhile, in the lounge, Maya sat beside her mother, Liana, who hadn't stopped holding her hand since they arrived. They hadn't returned home the night before. The press had already caught wind of the story. A 10-year-old girl saves major corporation from collapse. Reporters had camped outside their apartment in Queens. Victor had arranged for them to stay at the company's guest suite on the 28th floor for the night. "Mom," Maya whispered, "did I do something wrong?" "No, sweetheart," Liana said gently. "You did something brave, but they all looked so scared afterward." "They weren't scared of you," Liana said. "They were scared of what you made them feel." Back in the boardroom, Victor tapped the table. "You all saw it. You all heard it. That child translated $1 million negotiation more effectively than anyone on our payroll. She's brilliant," Sophia agreed, "but we can't build policy around a 10-year-old. "I'm not suggesting that," Victor replied, "but I want her safe, I want her educated, and I want Monroe Holdings to be the reason she reaches her potential, not the world that eats her alive." There was silence. A junior executive asked, "So what's the plan?" Victor's eyes narrowed. "We give her access, mentorship, scholarships, protection if needed, no contracts, no exploitation. We do this clean and quiet." 1. Meanwhile, outside the room, trouble was already brewing. A whisper campaign had begun among competitors. How could a child access company meetings? Was this a breach of confidentiality? Were trade secrets at risk? Within hours, an anonymous email had been sent to a financial watchdog group alleging unsafe protocol and corporate negligence. The story was already trending on 2 business blogs under the headline, "Child Translator Raises Legal Red Flags for Monroe Holdings." When Victor's assistant brought him the reports, he didn't flinch. "Expected," he muttered. "People fear what they can't control." He walked out of the boardroom and down the hall to the lounge. "Maya," he said gently, stepping in, "would you walk with me?" Maya looked at her mom. Liana nodded. "I'll be right here." Victor didn't speak until they reached the end of the quiet hallway, overlooking the city. "You saved us yesterday," he said, "but now we need to make sure you're safe too." I don't understand," Maya replied. "Some people out there, they don't like what happened. They'll try to twist it, make it seem like you weren't prepared, like we were reckless for trusting you." Maya blinked. "But I told the truth. I helped." "You did," Victor said, "and now I want to help you." "How?" "I want to create a program for students like you, bright kids, unseen kids. We'll sponsor language scholarships, send mentors. Maybe one day, you'll lead it." Maya hesitated. "Will people stop being angry?" Victor smiled faintly. "Some never will. But what matters is what you build from this moment forward." They walked back, but trouble was already outside the building. Paparazzi, protesters, even an online personality live streaming from the sidewalk, shouting about corporate irresponsibility and child labor in disguise. Liana held her daughter tighter. "We need to go home." Sophia stepped in. "Let us take you," quietly, through the service entrance. That night, back in Queens, their apartment felt both familiar and foreign. Reporters knocked until 9 p.m. Then it was quiet. Maya sat on the edge of her bed, clutching her old vocabulary notebook. It had jam stains on the back cover. Her mother sat beside her. "Do you regret it?" Liana asked softly. "No," Maya said, "but I didn't know it would be this hard." "Brilliance always has a price," Liana said, "but you paid it with courage." The next morning, an envelope slid under their door. No return address. Inside was a single card. "To Maya William, you didn't just translate words. You translated hope. VL." Below it, a smaller note. "A car will be waiting at 8 a.m. tomorrow. There's someone I want you to meet." The next chapter in Maya's story hadn't even begun, but the world had already started watching, and judging, and fearing. But Maya? She was quietly preparing. Because now, she understood. Saving a company was only the beginning. What came next would demand more than language. It would demand her voice, her choices, her truth. At precisely 8 a.m., a sleek black Lincoln pulled up outside the modest apartment building in Queens. It didn't honk or flash its lights. It simply waited. Maya stood at the window, her small backpack already slung over her shoulder. Her mother stood behind her, fingers resting gently on her daughter's shoulder. "You don't have to go," Liana whispered. "I know," Maya said, "but I think I need to." Liana bent down and pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Then be who you are, not who they want you to be." Maya nodded and turned toward the door. The car was warm inside. A driver in a crisp navy suit nodded once, respectfully, and pulled away from the curb without a word. Maya looked out the window as the city passed by Queens, melting into Manhattan's steel and glass spine. She didn't know where they were going. The note hadn't said. They didn't go to Monroe Holdings. Instead, the car wound through the west side, then pulled into a narrow lane in Tribeca, stopping in front of an old brick warehouse. The driver opened her door. Inside, second floor, Maya stepped out cautiously. A small plaque near the door read, "Ainsley Foundation. Private." Inside, the building was quiet. The elevator was slow. When she reached the second floor, a woman in her 60s greeted her in a cream suit, silver hair in a bun, eyes kind but sharp. "Miss Williams," she said. "Welcome. I'm Marion Green." Maya nodded, clutching her backpack tighter. "Who are you?" "I used to be someone like you," Marion said. "Come, he's waiting." They walked through a hallway lined with old photos, children in classrooms, graduation ceremonies, a young black girl shaking hands with a U.S. president. At the end of the hall was a heavy wooden door. Marion knocked once and opened it. The room was lined with books, no desk, just a large leather armchair near the window, and beside it, a man older, tall, leaning slightly on a cane. His eyes were sharp, but his posture relaxed. He stood when they entered. "Miss William," he said. "I'm Elliot Ainsley." Maya blinked. The name sounded familiar. "You're the founder of Ainsley Language Trust." "I was," he said. "Long time ago. I'm mostly a ghost now." She stood still, unsure what to say. "You don't know it," he continued. "But I've followed your work for about 3 days now." He smiled. Maya cracked a grin. "Sit," he said. She did. The chair was huge. Her feet didn't touch the floor. "Why am I here?" she asked. Elliot tapped his cane gently. "Because you did something extraordinary, and because I need your help." "My help?" He nodded. "You saved Monroe Holdings. That's the headline. But the real story is deeper. What you did shook certain doors open, and now some very powerful people are paying attention." Maya stared. "I don't understand." "You will," he said. "But first, I want to ask you something simple. Do you know what whisper networks are?" She hesitated. "Like rumors?" "In a way, but more dangerous. These are circles of influence, people who move things behind the curtain. They shape policies, cancel deals, erase names." He leaned closer. "And one of them does not like what you did." Silence. "They've started poking around. At you. At your mother. Even at your father's old job. They want to discredit what happened." Maya's throat tightened. "Why?" "Because they thrive on control," Elliot said. "And you remind people they're not in control." He stood, walked slowly to a shelf, and pulled down a thin folder. Inside were grainy images, photos of her, of Liana leaving the apartment, of James in his old uniform, time-stamped and labeled. Maya looked up. "They're spying on us?" "Yes." "Who's doing this?" Elliot sat again. "That's not the right question. The question is, how do you fight shadows?" Maya stayed quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You learn to see in the dark." Elliot smiled. "Exactly." He handed her a small black device, a digital recorder, slim and cold in her hand. "I want you to listen to something." He pressed play. A voice filled the room, male, deep, clipped. "Get the girl out. Discredit the story. Leak what we need to. No 10-year-old girl is going to disrupt years of positioning." Another voice responded. "And the mother? If she talks, smear her too." Maya stared at the recorder. "That's from a conversation 2 nights ago," Elliot said. Picked up in a private club in Midtown. They're serious. Always, Elliot said. But now so are we. He leaned forward. We're forming a protection network. Quiet, smart. People who've been where you are overlooked, underestimated. You'd be the youngest. But maybe the most visible. You'd have to be careful. Every step. Maya's voice was small. Why me? Because you speak truth, Elliot said. And in rooms where people profit from silence, that makes you dangerous. A long silence passed between them. Then Maya said, "What do I have to do?" Elliot leaned back. "First go home. Be a child for one more day. Hug your mother. Watch cartoons. Tomorrow, we begin training." Training? He nodded. For your voice, for your mind, for the world that's about to test both. As Maya left the building, the city didn't look different, but something in her had shifted. She knew now that courage wasn't just about saving a deal. It was about deciding who you'd stand for and who you'd stand against. And Maya William had just chosen. Maya arrived at the Ainsley Foundation building just after sunrise. The city was still yawning, shaking off its sleep, but she felt electric. She wore a blue zip-up hoodie, jeans, and the same battered sneakers she'd worn during the Monroe meeting. Her mother had kissed her goodbye with a trembling smile, and although Maya saw the worry behind her eyes, she also saw something else: pride. Marion Green greeted her at the door. "You're early," she said with a warm smile. "I didn't want to be late," Maya replied. "That alone makes you rare," Marion said. "Follow me." They walked through the now familiar hallway, past the framed photographs of young leaders, changemakers, and unlikely heroes. This time, Marion stopped in front of a door Maya hadn't noticed before, a narrow, gray-painted door with no sign. She tapped a code into a keypad, and it opened with a soft hiss. Inside was a different world. Gone were the elegant bookshelves and soft lighting. This room was lined with whiteboards, maps, computers, and video monitors. At the center sat a long table with half a dozen chairs. Two people were already there, one tall and wiry, the other round-faced with thick glasses. Both looked up as she entered. "This," Marion said, "is the beginning of your training." Maya stood frozen. "What kind of training?" "Observation, ethics, analysis, rhetoric, influence," said the wiry man. "My name's Oliver, former intelligence analyst. This here is Grace, behavioral psychology." Grace waved. "We're the weirdos behind the curtain." Maya smiled nervously. Elliot Ainsley entered next, moving slowly with his cane. "Today is about learning how the world works. You saved Monroe Holdings. Now you need to understand why that made you dangerous." He walked to a screen and tapped a button. A photo appeared: a corporate office, rows of desks. "This is a PR firm hired by one of the investors trying to discredit you." Another tap, a news headline appeared. "Child hero or corporate scandal." "That headline appeared less than 12 hours after your story broke," Elliot said. "It was planned in advance. They were waiting." Maya clenched her fists. "You're not alone," Grace said gently. "They've done it before. They do it all the time, but rarely does someone your age push back." Oliver stepped forward. "So we teach you to see them, their methods, their tells, their logic, and we teach you how to defend yourself and others." Over the next 4 hours, Maya sat through exercises she couldn't have imagined a week ago. In one session, Oliver played news clips and asked her to spot linguistic manipulation words, twisted to seed doubt or redirect emotion. Notice how they say "allegedly" 5 times before they even mention the facts. That's not journalism, that's framing. In another, Grace showed her how facial micro-expressions could reveal hidden intent. People lie with their mouths, but their eyebrows always snitch. Elliot taught her how to trace power. Follow the money. Who funds the voices trying to discredit you? What do they gain if your story disappears? Marion walked her through rhetoric. How to speak when facing a hostile room. How to ask questions that reveal more than accusations. By the end of the day, Maya's brain felt like it was buzzing, but she wasn't overwhelmed. She was awake. At lunch, she sat with Elliot in the small kitchen. He poured her tea. "You remind me of someone I knew once," he said quietly. "Who?" "My sister. She was 13 when she uncovered a fraud in our father's company. She was brilliant and too trusting. What happened? They made her look crazy. They leaked her school records, told the press she was unstable. She stopped speaking for a year. Maya's voice was soft. Did she ever come back from that? She became a lawyer, Elliot said. But she never stepped into a boardroom again. Maya stirred her tea. That won't be me. I believe you, Elliot said. That afternoon, they gave her a simulation, a mock interview, with a pretend journalist. The man was good. He smiled, asked innocent questions, then tried to twist her words. Maya stayed calm, paused before answering, redirected with precision. Afterward, Grace clapped. Not bad for your first tango with the media. Oliver nodded. She's fast. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, Elliot walked her back to the lobby. Tomorrow, he said, you'll meet someone new. Someone who used to be part of the same network that's targeting you. Why would they help us? Because they saw what happened to their own family, Elliot replied. And they've been looking for a way to make it right. Before Maya left, he handed her a small folder. Inside were newspaper clippings about her. Most were positive. Some weren't. You'll need to know what they're saying, Elliot said. Even the lies. Maya nodded. Back in the car, she didn't say a word. She stared at the clippings, then pulled out her notebook and began writing not translations, not vocabulary, but patterns. Who said what, when, to whom. She was connecting dots, building maps in her mind. That night, Liana made her favorite dinner, peanut stew with rice, and didn't ask too many questions. They sat in silence for a while, listening to an old jazz record. Then Maya said, "They're coming after us, but I think we're ready now." Her mother looked up. "Do you want to stop?" "No," Maya said. "I want to understand everything. I want to be better." Liana walked over, kneeled beside her chair, and cupped her daughter's face. "Then whatever they throw at us, we'll face it together." Maya slept that night with her notebook under her pillow and the memory of Elliot's words echoing in her dreams. The world isn't fair, but if you know how to read it, really read it, you can bend it toward justice. And for the first time, she believed she could. The next morning, Maya sat on a bench in the upper terrace of the Ainsley Foundation building, her notebook open on her lap. The city buzzed below her, taxis groaning, sirens echoing in the distance, but up here, it was quiet, almost too quiet. She was waiting, not for another lesson, but for someone Elliot said might change the course of everything. At 9:03 a.m., the elevator doors opened. He didn't look like she expected. No dark sunglasses or heavy coat. No nervous tics. He was in his 40s, black, clean-shaven, and dressed like someone who had once been powerful but now chose simplicity. Gray sweater, jeans, and a backpack slung over one shoulder. His eyes were sharp but tired. "Maya William?" he said. She nodded. "You're the whistleblower?" "That's what they call me now," he said, settling across from her. "My name is Andre Sims." She straightened, alert. "Elliot said you used to be with them, the group that's trying to discredit me." I was," Andre said. "Not proud of it, but I want you to understand how they work, how they win, and how we take their power apart." Maya leaned forward. "Tell me everything." Andre began. He once worked for a consulting firm in D.C. It looked legitimate on the surface, contracts with Fortune 500 embassies, even NGOs. But behind closed doors, they specialized in narrative suppression. "We didn't kill stories," he explained. "We made them invisible, reframed them, shifted the light so no one looked in the right direction." He had been one of their best, quiet, calculating, surgical with language. But things changed when he learned that his niece, a young activist, had been targeted. "They didn't know she was related to me," he said. "They just saw a threat." The room grew heavy. "I leaked internal files," Andre continued. "Proved their connections to a dozen media outlets, 3 lobbying firms, and half a dozen dark money nonprofits. And then I disappeared. But now you're here," Maya said. "Because they're doing it again," Andre said. "To you." He pulled out a tablet, swiped to a file, and turned it toward her. It was a timeline. Her face. Her mother's name. The Monroe boardroom incident. The Dubai deal. A heat map showing online engagement, followed by a chart of anonymous tips submitted to media channels. There were notes. Father left post under scrutiny. Mother's workplace under review. Possible academic dishonesty claims. Overexposed child narrative. "They're testing different angles," Andre said. looking for the one that sticks. Maya stared at the screen. They're trying to erase me. No, he said. Worse. They're trying to redefine you. Make people question who you are, what you did, not because you lied, but because your truth broke their pattern. What can we do? Andre smiled. We flipped the lens. Over the next 2 hours, he taught her his methods. How to dissect messaging. How to identify a smear campaign's entry point. It always starts with emotional bait, he explained. An image, a phrase, something that makes people angry, scared, or smug. Then they bury the truth 6 links deep. Maya practiced on real examples. They analyzed 2 articles, one that subtly painted her as an unstable prodigy, the other as a corporate pawn. She wrote counterstatements. Not defensively, but with clarity, with control. By noon, she had drafted a mock op-ed. I am not your exception. Why young voices belong at the table. Andre read it twice. You're ready. For what? She asked. To tell your story, he said. On your terms. But before she could respond, the building's internal intercom buzzed. Elliot to training room. Urgent. They rushed downstairs. Elliot stood by a monitor, flanked by Grace and Oliver. On screen was a breaking news alert. A major outlet had just published a story. Leaked files suggest corporate misconduct during Monroe Deal Source's site. Irregular translator incident. The byline belonged to a journalist, notorious for reputation takedowns. They've gone live, Oliver said. Who leaked it? Andre asked. We think it's someone inside Monroe, Grace replied. Possibly legal. Elliot turned to Maya. You don't have to do this. But she stood tall. I do. They worked fast. Within 30 minutes, Maya had recorded a video statement not polished, not produced, just honest. She sat in a chair, looking straight into the lens. My name is Maya William. I'm 10 years old. I speak 7 languages. I helped during a business meeting because no one else could. Now, some people are trying to make that look wrong. She paused. But I'm not the problem. I'm the proof. The proof that people like me, kids, girls, people of color are smarter than the system expects. And that scares them. But it shouldn't. It should inspire them. The video ended with her saying, You can't erase me. You can only reveal yourselves. Elliot posted it through 3 anonymous but trusted networks. Within 20 minutes, it had 40,000 views. By nightfall, 600,000. Comments poured in. She's a hero. Protect this girl at all costs. This is what brilliance looks like. The smear campaign lost momentum. The journalist who wrote the takedown faced public backlash. A whistleblower inside Monroe confirmed the internal leak. The tide was shifting. That evening, Maya returned home to find flowers on the doorstep. No card, just a small note. They tried. You didn't blink. VL. She showed it to her mother, who hugged her tightly. Are you scared? Liana asked. Maya thought about it. A little, she said. But mostly, I'm ready. That night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the city hum. She wasn't just surviving now. She was responding, building, growing. And somewhere in the dark corners of the networks that once sought to silence her, panic was spreading. Because their target had become a signal, and the girl they thought they could erase had just begun to write her own story. Maya didn't expect the silence to be this loud. After the video went viral, after the wave of public support, after Monroe Holdings made a formal statement confirming her story and praising her role in the deal, the smear campaign fell eerily quiet. Too quiet, Andre had warned her. When they can't attack in public, they regroup in private. The real fight isn't over. Elliot confirmed it during their next strategy session. They're moving underground now, not in headlines, but in boardrooms, back channels. They'll try to isolate you, divide your support, make people hesitate to stand beside you. Maya was no longer scared. She was sharpening. Each day she trained. Her understanding of how the system operated deepened, and so did her sense of responsibility. That morning, Grace introduced a new exercise, scenario modeling. Maya had to navigate through a fictional corporate crisis using only conversation, logic, and emotional intelligence. The simulation was brutal. She was cast as the youngest member of a corporate advisory board facing a moral dilemma, a partner firm accused of labor violations. The adults in the room kept talking over her, dismissing her input, redirecting the conversation to spreadsheets and quarterly forecasts. But Maya, composed, asked one quiet question. What if that was your child working there? Silence. She won the room. Afterward, Grace pulled her aside. You have a gift, Maya, not just with languages, with people. But back in Queens, the pressure was growing. Her mother's work received anonymous calls questioning her credentials. Their building superintendent hinted that too many cameras and reporters had become a liability. One evening, a man in a suit stood across the street for nearly 2 hours, never looking away. Andre began personally escorting Maya to and from the foundation. The network was watching. That week, Elliot called an emergency meeting. A new file had surfaced leaked documents from a think tank tied to one of Monroe's largest investors. In it, a section was dedicated entirely to neutralizing public risk figures, and Maya's name appeared twice. They're planning something, Oliver said. Something quieter than before. No articles, just pressure points. Maya looked around the table. So what do we do? Elliot slid a folder across the table. We go to Baltimore. She blinked. Baltimore? There's someone there who used to work for the think tank. She left 5 years ago, changed her name, but she has files we've never seen, names, strategies, financial links. Why now? Maya asked. She reached out, Elliot said. She saw your video, said it reminded her of who she used to be. 3 days later, under tight security, Maya, Liana, and Andre arrived in Baltimore. They met the woman in a quiet cafe near the harbor. She was in her early 50s, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that never settled. She introduced herself only as Nia. They'll know I talked, Nia said, but I can't stay silent anymore. From her bag, she pulled a small hard drive. This has names, donors, shadow firms, asset flows. It proves they've orchestrated disinformation against dozens of people like you. Maya took the drive gently. Why did you keep it? She asked. Because I was waiting for someone who wouldn't be bought off, Nia replied. Someone too young to be compromised. Someone who scared them more than I ever could. That night, back in their hotel room, Andre scanned the drive. What they saw stunned them. Not only did it contain blueprints for silencing dissenters, but it also revealed internal memos detailing tactics used in racial profiling, whistleblower targeting, and strategic misinformation campaigns spanning multiple industries. They don't just silence people, Andre said. They erase them. Elliot arranged for the drive to be duplicated, encrypted, and stored in 3 separate locations. Grace contacted her legal network. Oliver began preparing a timeline for exposure, but it was Maya who proposed the boldest move yet. What if we bring them into the light? She asked. You mean leak it? Andre said. Not anonymously, not through back channels. I mean we go public together, one voice, one platform. They expect us to hide. But what if we don't? The team debated for hours. The risks were massive. The exposure would be irreversible. But the next morning, Elliot gave his answer. Let's break the silence. Plans were laid. A press conference. A coalition of advocates, journalists, legal minds, and Maya at the center. They called it the Clarity Project. In the weeks leading up to the event, Maya trained harder than ever. Media handling, legal protections, psychological prep. She memorized data points, understood legal lines she couldn't cross, and practiced answers to hostile questions. The day of the press conference arrived, held at a public hall in Manhattan, with full live-stream coverage. Hundreds attended. Thousands tuned in online. Elliot opened with a calm statement. We are not here to accuse. We are here to reveal, to let facts speak louder than fear. Then Andre spoke, presenting the document trail, connecting the firms, explaining the mechanics. And then it was Maya's turn. She stood behind the podium, hands steady. My name is Maya William. I'm 10 years old. I love languages. I love stories. And I never thought I'd have to fight for the right to tell my own. She walked them through what had happened, not in rage, but in clarity. They tried to turn my truth into a threat. But the real threat is silence. Silence protects those who hurt others. Silence covers the cracks where injustice hides. She ended with a line that would echo across media channels for days. Truth isn't fragile, power is, and I'm not afraid of either. The room erupted in applause. That evening, the story broke wide. Major networks picked it up. Investigations were announced. A senator even called for a federal review into corporate influence networks. The next morning, Outside their apartment, someone had scrawled a message in chalk. "We see you, Maya." And we're not silent anymore. And for the first time in weeks, Maya smiled not just with her lips, but with something deeper certainty. The fight was far from over, but she wasn't alone anymore. In the days that followed the Clarity Project press conference, the world buzzed. Media coverage exploded. News anchors debated Maya's courage. Editorials praised Elliot's moral leadership. Hashtags trended. Support poured in from teachers, activists, artists, and even a few CEOs who had long remained quiet. It felt, for a brief moment, like justice had cracked the sky open. But with every wave of light comes the shadows. The backlash started small. Anonymous emails flooded Maya's school district. Some accused her of being a planted PR child. Others questioned whether she even existed. Liana received a formal inquiry from her employer, a supposedly routine audit. But it felt surgical in its timing. Then came the bots. Grace was the first to spot them, fake accounts on social media, parroting the same doubt-riddled phrases, "Too young to be real." "Where are the receipts?" Scripted by adults. Andre, furious, traced several of the accounts back to a data farm in Moldova, known for operating black market influence operations. "They're going scorched earth," he said. "They're trying to flood the truth with noise." Elliot remained calm. "Expected. That means we're winning." But for Maya, the noise wasn't theoretical. One morning, on her way to a quiet bookstore she loved, someone hissed, "Lying brat," under their breath as she passed. She kept walking, head held high, but her hands trembled. She told no one. Back at the Ainsley Foundation, security protocols were tightened. Andre hired a digital forensics firm. Grace expanded the crisis response team. A new name surfaced, a PR executive named Nolan Fisk, once tied to one of the corporations exposed by the Clarity Project. "He's running damage control," Oliver said. "Off the books." Quietly, they learned Fisk had connections to several international lobbying firms, including one with direct ties to media executives who had suddenly stopped booking Maya on shows. Where once the phone rang constantly, now it didn't. "They're trying to erase momentum," Elliot said. "Keep her out of the spotlight. Wait for the story to die." Maya listened, absorbed, then said, "So we changed the story." The room turned to her. "What if we show what happens behind the curtain?" she said. "Let people see how the pressure works, how they try to make voices disappear." "You want to document the smear campaign?" Grace asked. Maya nodded. "We tell the story behind the story, not just mine, others. Whistleblowers, journalists, workers who got fired for speaking up." Elliot smiled slowly. "Truth Against the Tide." They called the project Unmuted. It launched as a podcast series hosted by Grace and Maya. The first episode told Maya's full story, but with behind-the-scenes detail, her training, the surveillance, the internal memos. The second episode featured Nia, the former think tank employee. Others followed a nurse who exposed a medical billing scam, a warehouse worker who reported abuse. It took off faster than anyone expected. Within 3 weeks, Unmuted had 2 million downloads. Donations flooded in. Maya became not just a symbol but a platform, a voice for those too scared to speak alone. But the other side didn't stay idle. One night, their servers were hit with a denial of service attack, 84,000 simultaneous requests. The podcast went offline for 6 hours. Andre called in a cybersecurity specialist who confirmed the origin, a firm in Prague known to sell digital sabotage to private clients. "They're scared," the specialist said, "and rich." The team pressed forward. In episode 7, Maya interviewed a former Monroe board member who had quietly resigned after the Dubai deal. He spoke of pressure, bribes, and whispered threats from power brokers who wanted control over global education initiatives. His voice cracked as he admitted, "I should have done more to protect that girl. She reminded me of my own daughter." That episode changed everything. A major senator cited it during a live congressional hearing on corporate lobbying. It led to a call for new whistleblower protections. Maya was invited to speak before a subcommittee, but Elliot declined on her behalf. "She's done enough for now," he said. "Let the system do its part." Instead, the foundation focused on protecting their growing network of voices. New encryption tools, a legal defense fund, a mental health hotline. Maya helped design the visual identity, a growing tree with thousands of roots. We all grow from the same ground, she said, even if they try to cut us down. But the pressure was unrelenting. One evening, while walking home from a quiet dinner with Liana, a black SUV slowed beside them. The window rolled down. A man inside, sunglasses at night. A smirk said calmly, "Careful what doors you open." Not all of them close again. Then the car sped away. Maya didn't flinch. But that night, she couldn't sleep. Elliot called an emergency circle. "We're crossing into something deeper now," he warned. "This isn't just reputational war. This is systemic defense. They're protecting infrastructure, pipelines of money, decades of silence." "So what do we do?" Maya asked. Elliot's voice was firm. "We widen the light." They released a special unmuted episode, "The Cost of Silence," revealing the lengths to which certain entities had gone to suppress truth, not just about Maya, but about corruption across finance, healthcare, education. They partnered with investigative reporters, dropped documents in secure archives, encouraged anonymous leaks, and they kept speaking. That weekend, Maya attended a community rally in Harlem. As she took the stage, her voice clear despite the fatigue, she looked out over a sea of faces, elders, teens, mothers with babies on their hips. "I was never supposed to speak," she said, "but I did. And what I've learned is this: speaking isn't the end, it's the beginning." Cheers erupted. "I am not brave because I'm loud," she continued. "I'm brave because I listened. And then I acted. You can too." The crowd rose to its feet. Afterward, an old man in a weathered cap approached her. "You remind me of when we marched," he said softly. "Back then, we didn't have podcasts, just feet in fire. But the heart? Same thing." Maya hugged him. That night, she sat with Liana in their small kitchen, sipping hot cocoa, the city quiet outside. "Do you think it's working?" she asked. Liana smiled. "If they're still fighting you, it means you're winning." And Maya believed her, because the world wasn't quiet anymore, and neither was she. The morning sky over Manhattan was a pale gray, still and tense, like the moments before a storm. Maya sat in the back of a black sedan, dressed in a navy blue blazer and khaki trousers, her hands folded neatly on her lap. Today, she wasn't going to school, she was going to testify. A formal inquiry had been opened by the Federal Communications Oversight Committee, investigating corporate disinformation practices. Although she was underage, special counsel had requested a closed-door session for her testimony, not because she wasn't ready, but because what she knew could ignite a political fire. Andre sat beside her, calm and silent. He'd briefed her for days, helped her anticipate every question, every trick, every subtle maneuver they might use to unsettle her. But Maya wasn't afraid of being unsettled. She was afraid of being unheard. "Remember," Andre said as they approached the building, "you're not here to impress. You're here to tell the truth." "I remember," she said. "I wrote it in my notebook last night. Truth doesn't have to shout." Security led them through a side entrance. Inside, she was greeted not by flashing lights or cameras, but by a semicircle of high-backed chairs, each occupied by a congressional staffer or legal advisor. At the center sat Senator Maria Lowell, chair of the committee, a sharp-witted, iron-spined former prosecutor who had once dismantled a corporate tax evasion ring. "Miss William," she said as Maya sat, "thank you for being here. Thank you for listening," Maya replied. The session began. Senator Lowell asked about the Dubai meeting, the first time Maya had ever intervened. Maya recounted the moment, word for word, tone for tone, and as she did, something shifted in the room. What had once been seen as a curious anomaly, a child stepping into the adult world, began to feel like a prophecy. From there, they discussed the smear campaign, the fake headlines, the bots, the subtle threats. Senator Lowell frowned. "And when did you realize you were being targeted?" "When they tried to make me feel ashamed of being useful," Maya said. A murmur swept the room. They moved into the second phase, the Clarity Project files. Maya explained, carefully but clearly, how the networks operated, how messaging was seeded, how power disguised itself behind think tanks and lobbyists and friendly news anchors. "And these documents?" Senator Lowell asked, tapping the packet before her. "You confirm these were obtained ethically?" "They were leaked to us by a former insider," Maya said. She came to us because she believed the truth mattered more than her reputation. And why do you think this matters now? Because the line between influence and manipulation has disappeared, Maya said. And if we don't draw it again, someone else will in pencil, and they'll use an eraser whenever it suits them. That line, so concise, so devastatingly clear, ended the session. Outside, the press had gathered. Grace ushered Maya past the cameras quickly, shielding her from the flash. They didn't stop to give statements. Not yet. That would come later. Back at the foundation, the team regrouped. Elliot looked older than usual, not tired, but deeply focused. This hearing will change things, he said. The committee's considering legislation. Whistleblower expansions, protections for digital identities. They wouldn't have done that a year ago, Andre added. They didn't have Maya a year ago, Grace said. Still, the celebration was muted, because the fight wasn't over. That night, a new twist hit the airwaves. A major broadcast channel ran a segment titled, Child Prodigy or Political Puppet. It was slick, well-produced, dripping with veiled suspicion. A familiar face narrated Nolan Fisk. Maya watched from the couch with her mother. She didn't flinch, but her hand slowly gripped Liana's. It's always the same trick, she whispered. Turn truth into a threat. Turn threats into entertainment. Then we make it boring for them, Liana said. We tell the truth so well, they can't spin it anymore. The next day, Maya went back to school. It was awkward. Whispers in the hallway, stares in the cafeteria. Some students were curious, others were cold. One girl, as Maya passed her locker, muttered, Bet she thinks she's too smart for us now. But in history class, her teacher paused the lesson and said, Before we begin, I want to take a moment to acknowledge bravery. He looked at Maya. We often talk about the founding fathers, civil rights leaders, protesters in the streets, but sometimes courage walks quietly through our hallways, and we don't even notice. She looked down, trying not to cry. Later that afternoon, Elliot called a team meeting. Something new had arrived, a letter. Unmarked envelope, no return address. Inside was a single sentence, typed in a plain font. You were right to speak. They will come for me next. Attached was a flash drive. They opened it carefully, isolated from their network. It contained records from a private contractor, audio recordings, internal memos, correspondence between corporations and influencers hired to discredit whistleblowers. The voice on one recording was unmistakable. Nolan Fiske. Looks like our next guest on Unmuted just volunteered, Andre said. The next episode dropped 72 hours later. Titled, The Fixer. It aired Fisk's own words boasting about silencing truth tellers, mocking media ethics, describing how they dangled shiny objects in front of journalists to distract from the real stories. The fallout was immediate. Networks severed ties. Political leaders distanced themselves. One of the firms linked in the recordings was subpoenaed by the same committee Maya had testified before. But most importantly, the public, the regular people watching, began to see the outline of a machine that had long operated in shadows. Emails poured in. I never trusted those headlines, but I didn't know why. My daughter wants to be like Maya. Thank you. I was afraid to speak up at work. Not anymore. And in one handwritten note, scrawled in purple ink, you reminded me that my voice matters. The team read them all, but Maya kept one and taped it to her bedroom mirror. The backlash had become a reckoning, and the girl they once tried to erase had become the architect of their undoing. It was just past 6 a.m. when Maya sat by the window, watching the street below awaken. Trucks clattered over manholes. A cyclist zipped through the early mist. Across the street, a bakery's neon sign flickered on, casting a pink hue on the sidewalk. The world moved forward, unaware of how close it had come to forgetting the truth. She hadn't slept much, not because of fear, but because something had shifted. The battle was no longer about her. It had grown beyond Monroe Holdings, beyond the smears and the leaks and the podcasts. It had become something deeper, a confrontation with how power hides, how truth is buried, and how easy it is to let silence win. Liana placed a hand on her shoulder. Big day? Maya nodded. Bigger than I expected. Today, she was meeting with the Education Equity Board of New York. an invitation issued after the Clarity Project had unveiled the reach of corporate messaging into school curricula. She wasn't expected to lead the meeting, only to speak. But Maya never just spoke. At the foundation, Elliot was pacing. "They'll test you," he said. "They'll smile, agree in principle, and then ask questions designed to undermine the point." "I'm used to that," Maya replied calmly. "You're going into their house this time, not ours." Andre handed her a file. "These are the names on the board. You'll want to remember the key ones: Moira Hallberg, resistant to reform. Franklin Dell, might be sympathetic but cautious. Don't get thrown off by politeness. They're not offering you tea. They're guarding the walls." "Let's make them rethink the walls," Maya said. The meeting room was elegant in its understatement: dark wood paneling, tall windows, and a long U-shaped table facing rows of observers. Maya sat between two foundation advisors. Cameras were forbidden. This was off-record. But everyone knew that meant high stakes. Moira Hallberg, a stern woman in her 60s with an impeccable gray bob, leaned forward first. "We appreciate your perspective, Miss William. But how do we balance personal anecdotes with institutional policy?" Maya didn't blink. "By recognizing that every policy is made up of thousands of personal outcomes. If they all point to harm, then the policy isn't neutral. It's harmful." A quiet murmur swept the room. Franklin Dell, younger, in his 40s with soft features and tortoiseshell glasses, chimed in. "But don't we risk politicizing education by allowing individual stories to drive public investment?" "You risk something worse by pretending neutrality is apolitical," Maya replied. "Silence is a political stance, especially when it benefits the powerful." For an hour, they debated, lines drawn, ideas tested. Maya answered each challenge not as a child prodigy, but as someone who had been forged in a fire most adults never faced. She spoke of misinformation in textbooks, the erasure of black voices in historical curricula, the economic manipulation of charter school networks. "Equity," she said near the end, "isn't charity, it's correction." When she stepped outside into the sunlight, the observers who had quietly filled the back rows stood and clapped, not loudly, not performatively, just long enough to let her know they heard her. That evening, back at the foundation, Elliot announced they had a problem. "There's a counter-project," he said, laying a dossier on the table. "Same structure as Clarity, anonymous experts, but it's all spin." Grace flipped through the file. "They're calling it Perspective United, pitched as a diversity think tank, but the funding trail leads right back to the firms we exposed." Andre shook his head. "It's a shadow clone. They're trying to reframe the whole conversation," Oliver added. "Control the language again. Terms like ethical storytelling, narrative moderation. Sounds benign, but it's just censorship with a smile." Maya stood silent. "They're not just playing defense anymore," Elliot said. "They're rebuilding their house, and they're putting velvet ropes on the doors. So we open the windows," Maya said. She proposed a live forum, Truth Lab, a rotating series of community-led town halls, where victims of narrative manipulation could speak directly, without filters, without spin. No suits, no scripts, just truth, raw and uncomfortable. It launched in Brooklyn. A retired teacher recounted how her district removed entire sections on redlining from the curriculum. A former social worker described losing her job after whistleblowing on racial profiling practices. A young journalist admitted being offered money to kill an investigation. Maya didn't speak much. She moderated. She listened. The fourth Truth Lab, held in Atlanta, drew national attention. So much so that a certain powerful man showed up. Nolan Fiske. He didn't announce himself. Just sat in the back, flanked by two aides. Maya spotted him mid-session. She said nothing. Afterward, as the room emptied, he approached. "You've made quite the name for yourself," he said. "I didn't make the name," she replied. "You just tried to erase it." He smiled, thin and calculated. "You know this doesn't end the way you think." "I'm not thinking about the end," she said. "I'm thinking about the others watching." Fisk leaned in. "They'll never let you win." She stepped forward, eyes steady. "Then they'll have to watch me fight." He left. Back at the foundation, Elliot debriefed the team. "He's rattled," he said, "which means his network is rattled." Andre nodded. "They've tried to buy silence, spin facts, discredit messengers, but they can't unring the bell." Grace added, The question is, what do we do with the momentum? Maya answered, we build something that lasts. She unveiled a plan for an educational fund, the William Trust, dedicated to funding truth-telling in marginalized communities. Grants for local historians, scholarships for youth reporters, training for teachers in narrative ethics. It's not just about fighting them, she said. It's about planting something bigger than them. The board approved it, and as word spread, support came from unexpected places. A former CEO anonymously donated $2 million. A country music singer released a song inspired by Maya's words. Retired librarians volunteered to digitize neglected community archives. One night, as Maya and Liana walked home under a canopy of amber streetlights, Liana turned to her daughter. Do you ever wish things could go back, before all this? Maya thought for a long moment. I wish the world didn't need me to be this loud, she said. But since it does, I'm glad I didn't stay quiet. They walked on, hand in hand, past stoops and flickering porch lights, through a city slowly waking to itself. And above them, somewhere in the tall, indifferent skyline, truth was carving its name, not in stone, but in the breath of those who dared speak, when silence would have been safer. The wind off the Hudson carried a bite that morning, slicing through the spaces between buildings like whispered warnings. At the Ainsley Foundation's main office, the team had gathered early. Elliot stood at the window, arms folded. Grace was on her third coffee. Andre checked his watch for the 5th time in an hour. Something was coming. They could feel it. Maya entered the room quietly, wearing a navy peacoat and a red wool hat Liana had knit herself. She looked small compared to the tall windows and sweeping ceilings, but when she spoke, her presence filled the space. Are we ready? Elliot turned. As we'll ever be. The government had requested a second testimony. This time, not behind closed doors. The House Committee on Ethics and Technology had invited Maya to speak before a nationally televised panel on the influence of disinformation in education and public trust. The invitation was not just symbolic. It was the system acknowledging that the problem ran deeper than rogue bad actors. It was structural. Andre tapped the thick binder on the table. Everything you'll need is in here: timeline, names, cross-referenced media examples. But speak from your gut. That's what they remember. Maya nodded. I know. The hearing was held in D.C., inside a room that had hosted decades of conflicting truths, where power disguised itself in protocol. Maya sat at the center table, her hands calmly folded, her heart steady. Cameras flashed. Reporters jostled. The gavel fell. The chairman, a stern man with gray eyebrows like wings, opened the floor. Miss William, we recognize your testimony today not just as symbolic, but substantive. Please proceed. Maya looked up, her voice even. When I first spoke, they told me I was too young. When I kept speaking, they said I was too loud. And when I refused to stop, they said I must be manipulated. But I'm here to tell you I am none of those things. I am simply someone who paid attention, and what I saw frightened me. She laid out the system, how corporations used shell networks to rewrite public discourse, how school districts were pressured into adopting politically sanitized curricula, how influencers were paid to discredit truth-tellers, and how every time a voice rose up, a machine rose to silence it. The problem, she said, is not just misinformation, it's the infrastructure of silence. The room was still. Then came the questions. A congressman from Utah asked about safeguards. A representative from Georgia questioned whether highlighting injustice created division. Maya answered each with poise, weaving data and human impact into every sentence. When it was over, the panel applauded. Rare, unprecedented. The chairman leaned forward. Miss William, thank you. You reminded us that democracy is not inherited, it is defended. As she exited the chamber, a group of students stood outside with hand-painted signs. Truth has no age. Maya, for president. Listen to the kids. She smiled, nodded once, and kept walking. Back in New York, the foundation was buzzing. Downloads of the unmuted podcast spiked. Donations doubled. A grant offer arrived from a major university to fund the William Trust's next phase curriculum development. But there was tension too. Nolan Fisk had not disappeared. In fact, he'd announced a new venture, an open media initiative called Vera, pitched as a bipartisan content platform. But files uncovered by Oliver showed Vera was anything but neutral. Backers included some of the same firms exposed by Clarity. Its mission, to recenter the narrative. They're moving faster now, Grace warned, trying to reclaim the ground we took. They want control before reform becomes law, Elliot added. So we take the next step, Maya said. She proposed something bold. A national summit. Not just a conference, but a reckoning. Experts, educators, whistleblowers, students. A gathering to expose, explore, and rebuild public trust in storytelling. We'll call it The Line, she said, because there has to be one, between truth and agenda, between silence and complicity. The summit was set for spring. Planning began immediately. Venues were scoped, invitations sent. Maya curated panels herself. One was titled, The Stories We Bury. Another, Neutrality is Not Justice. A special youth roundtable was organized, where students from underrepresented communities could speak directly to decision-makers. But as the summit drew near, so did the threats. Emails warning of consequences, anonymous packages, Grace's personal phone number leaked. The foundation's main server was hit again, this time more aggressively. They're panicking, Andre said. But Elliot was concerned. That means they're desperate. Maya stayed focused. She added one more panel to the lineup, a solo session called The Map We Make, where she would speak, not as a symbol, but as a navigator, a voice mapping how the world could choose differently. The night before the summit, Maya couldn't sleep. She walked the halls of the foundation, pausing by the portraits of past changemakers the organization had honored: lawyers, teachers, journalists, artists, people who had spoken when silence was safer. She paused at an empty frame at the end of the hall. "What's this one for?" she asked Elliot, who had just come down the corridor. "That's for whoever makes the next impossible thing happen," he said. She smiled. "Save it," she replied. "We'll need more than one." The next morning, the line opened in a sunlit conference center overlooking the East River. Attendees came from 30 states, 7 countries. The energy was palpable, something between a march and a movement. Maya's session was the final event. As she stepped onto the stage, the room quieted. "I used to think stories were just things we told," she began. "But now I know they're the things that tell us who we are." She walked the audience through the journey. From a broken interpreter at a high-stakes meeting, to the revelations of Clarity, to the counterattacks, to the people who showed up anyway. They tried to tell me I was alone, but I wasn't. I had every voice they tried to silence. I had all the names they tried to erase. She paused. "And now, I have you." The room erupted. Later that evening, as the summit closed, an older woman approached Maya with tears in her eyes. "I used to be a teacher," she said. "I quit when they told me I couldn't teach real history anymore. But after today, I think I'll try again." Maya held her hand. "Please do. They need you." As the sun dipped behind the skyline, casting gold over the water, Maya stood by the railing, wind brushing her hair. She wasn't waiting for the storm anymore. She was becoming it. The day after the line summit ended, the city was still, as if holding its breath. The chairs had been stacked, the banners taken down, but the air buzzed with something that hadn't existed before. Not a movement, not even a revolution. Something quieter, but deeper resolve. Maya sat on the rooftop of the foundation building, her legs crossed, hands tucked into the sleeves of her sweater. The sky above was streaked with lavender and orange, the kind of sunset that reminded you the world was capable of beauty even when it had disappointed you. She had spent the morning answering messages, letters from students, teachers, whistleblowers, strangers who'd watched her session online and said they cried without knowing why. One note read simply, "You didn't just draw a line. You reminded me where mine was." Liana joined her on the rooftop, carrying 2 cups of chamomile tea. She handed one to Maya and sat beside her in silence. "Did it work?" Liana asked finally. Maya exhaled. "I don't know. I think maybe it doesn't work like a switch. Maybe it's more like planting a forest. Slow, invisible, but growing." Liana nodded. "And you? Are you still growing?" Maya turned, smiled. "Every day." That night, the board of the Ainsley Foundation held a private dinner not to celebrate, but to reflect. Elliot spoke first. He stood at the head of the long mahogany table, his voice calm but charged. "What Maya has reminded us," he said, "is that the most dangerous lie we ever accept is that the truth will take care of itself. It won't. It needs gardeners. It needs shields. It needs children willing to speak when the world insists they whisper." They toasted not to her, but to the thousands of voices rising because she did. Over the next few months, the William Trust expanded. Local initiatives bloomed across the country. Maya visited Detroit, Tulsa, Oakland, Louisville, anywhere people felt forgotten. She didn't come to give speeches. She came to listen. In one town, she met a librarian who had hidden banned books under a floorboard. In another, a teenager confessed he'd been writing down everything his principal told him to ignore. In every room, there was someone carrying a piece of the story. Back in New York, Elliot called a final team meeting before the winter break. "There's one more file," he said. He placed it on the table. The cover was stamped with the name of a consulting firm known for designing media strategy for global corporations. Inside, blueprints for a coordinated campaign of narrative suppression. Across education, healthcare, environment, immigration, it was the missing link, a roadmap of control. "They built it like a machine," Andre said. "Every story filtered, every counter, narrative managed." Grace traced the timeline. "This started before Maya ever spoke. Years before. They were afraid long before she existed," Elliot said. Maya sat quietly, studying the file. "We have to show it." Oliver hesitated. "This would blow open everything. There could be real consequences." Maya looked up. "There already were. For everyone who stayed quiet." The team agreed. The foundation launched a final series of Unmuted, a 3-part special titled The Blueprint. Each episode dismantled the machine, how it worked, who built it, how people unknowingly played into its silence. The release crashed the servers in the first hour. Across the country, conversations changed. News anchors referenced the series on air. City councils passed ordinances to protect whistleblowers. Universities redesigned media ethics programs using the blueprint as case study material. Then came the reckoning. An international coalition of watchdog organizations filed suits against 3 of the firms exposed. Senate hearings resumed. Several high-level resignations followed. One former executive, testifying anonymously, said, "We didn't fear exposure. We feared a child who wouldn't back down." Oh, Maya's name was submitted for the National Civic Honor Award, the youngest person ever considered. She declined. "I don't want to be honored," she said. "I want others to be heard." Spring arrived. Trees bloomed along the avenues. And the world, once so confident in its own stories, now paused to ask where those stories came from. On a warm April afternoon, Maya returned to the same office building where it all began, where she had stepped forward to translate, to help, to save something fragile. The receptionist didn't recognize her. That was fine. She walked through the lobby, memory tugging at every corner, the marble floor, the cold air, the echo of "Get her out of here," now overwritten by the memory of her own words. "Let me help." Upstairs, the new CEO of Monroe Holdings, a woman named Victoria Giles, waited. Giles had taken over after internal reforms, promising transparency and restitution. She greeted Maya with an extended hand and a tired but grateful smile. "You changed everything," Giles said. "No," Maya replied. "I reminded you who it's for." They spoke for 40 minutes. No cameras, no microphones, just clarity. As she left the building, a janitor nodded at her. He didn't say anything, but he tapped his temple, then his heart. Maya smiled and did the same. The world didn't erupt. There were no parades, just progress, quiet, firm, and real. Weeks later, Maya stood in front of her classroom. It was career day. Her teacher had asked her to speak not as a prodigy, not as an activist, just as herself. She wrote 2 words on the board: "Truth matters." Then she turned to her classmates and asked, "When was the last time you trusted what you heard without asking where it came from?" No one answered. She smiled. "Good. That means you're thinking." The bell rang. "Students, fill it out." One girl lingered. "Do you think someone like me can do what you did?" she asked. Maya tilted her head. I think someone like you is exactly who will do what I haven't yet." The girl beamed and ran off. That evening, Maya walked home with Liana. The sky above them burned gold. "So what now?" Liana asked. "Now," Maya said. "Now we teach others to draw the line." And somewhere, not far, another voice, once silenced, began to speak. The story of Maya William teaches us that courage knows no age, and truth, though often quiet, can be the most powerful force in the world. In a time when silence was expected and manipulation disguised as normalcy, one young voice challenged an entire system built on deception. Her journey reminds us that real change begins when we dare to speak, especially when it's hard. It is not fame or power that defines impact, but integrity, persistence, and the belief that justice is worth fighting for, even when the odds seem impossible.